Team Conrad or Team Jeremiah? How about a secret third thing that doesn't involve either one of them? Is that not an option? Or let's talk about love triangles. People have a love-hate relationship with love triangles. They're exhausting, they're unrealistic, they're irrational. We've heard it all. But I don't think the problem with the Somebody Turned Pretty stems from the fact that there's a love triangle. It's that the love triangle is the entire show. If you look at a show like The Vampire Diaries, yes, it's Elena and the Elena love triangle was always the core of the first few seasons, but it wasn't always the biggest or main plot point. You could hate Elena and Elena and still enjoy the show as a whole, because as much as the love triangle was always a central part to the story, it wasn't always the most entertaining. If you didn't like Elena or Delana, you had witches, werewolves, doppelgangers, the originals, the iconic Klaus Michelson. There were so many other interesting storylines to focus on. In One Tree Hill, if you didn't like Brucus or Layton, you could say forget the love triangle altogether and ship Naley. If you didn't like Naley, you could watch Dan Scott be the worst father in TV history.
Don't want to get that heart rate up, especially since you stopped taking your meds. Be a shame if you collapse right here on the court and no one to call an ambulance.
You had a buffet of options. You could tune out the love triangle and still be entertained. And the Somebody Turned Pretty, there's Conrad, Jeremiah, or yeah, that's it. That's the menu. This is what we got. And if you don't like that, you pretty much have to starve. They had decent side characters in season 1 and then wrote them off and spent the entirety of season 2 crying about a house. I almost think love triangles are suffering from being too intentional. Instead of it just being a part of the story, it's like now the whole plot has to revolve around a love triangle just because teen drama law says so. And when you reduce the whole show to who will Belly choose and neither option is all that great, it's hard for me to watch. The thing is, I honestly wanted to like both ships. I really did. Originally, I thought I would like Conrad because that angsty, slow burn, broody dynamic is usually my thing. But then I got annoyed with that and I tried to hop on the Jeremiah train and I couldn't connect with that either. When it comes to Belly and Conrad, we're constantly being told by the narration, by Belly, by literally everyone around her that she's obsessed with Conrad.
All right, I get it!
And the whole time I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, but why though? The tricky thing about the childhood crush trope is that it sometimes can open the door for lazy storytelling. I've Loved Them Forever can end up doing way too much of the heavy lifting. When you set up the story like this, a large part of her falling in love with him happens before the start of the show. And all we get to fill in the gaps are flashbacks and longing stares. My biggest issue with this relationship is how much the story leans on telling us their love without actually showing us why. There's so much exposition, it feels like they're trying to narrate their way into a love story.
Keep saying it. Just keep saying it. Keep saying it out loud. And maybe you will convince Hope, because you won't be convincing anybody else. So
like the show just begs us to believe in this epic romance instead of actually showing us one. And suddenly we're just expected to buy into this grand love story without actually ever seeing one unfold. If I'm gonna believe in this epic romance, I need more than flashbacks and Taylor Swift songs.
I thought it was fun. I like the beat. So, yeah.
But hey, at least the show makes it clear we're supposed to believe in Belly's love for Conrad. Because when it comes to Jeremiah, listen, I wanted to believe in him. I really did. But the way he's written feels more like a plot device than the second half to a love triangle. I see a lot of people ask, why even ship Jeremiah and Belly if you know they're not going to be endgame according to the books? And that question right there encapsulates the problem with the way this love triangle is written. Why do you think Hollywood is so obsessed with love triangles to begin with? They're easy to market. It creates built-in tension. It turns fandom into competition. Twilight built an entire cultural phenomenon off of Team Edward versus Team Jacob.
Team Edward!
When I first binge-watched The Vampire Diaries, I already knew that Stefan and Elena were not going to be endgame. And I still shipped them. I still decided to plant my flag on Team Stelena, knowing full well I was going to get my heart broken at the end. Why? Because they were that compelling. The chemistry, the emotional weight, the history. It didn't matter that I was on the losing side. I was still invested in them. Just because a ship isn't endgame doesn't mean no one is supposed to root for them.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
The reality is, if the writers thought no one would like a ship, it wouldn't be in the show. So yes, people are supposed to root for the ship that is losing. That is why it exists. Someone is supposed to root for Jeremiah and Belly, just the way someone else is supposed to root for Conrad and Belly. You're supposed to have people divided. When Elena had to pick between Stefan or Damon at the end of season 3 of The Vampire Diaries, I was at the edge of my seat. I genuinely felt like it could have gone either way, because regardless of who you thought Elena loved more, you were convinced that she did love both. Both Damon and Stefan felt like real choices. That is what it looks like to set real stakes. The mystery and the tension of who is she gonna choose is what makes a love triangle fun. And yet, it's like the show doesn't get that. I get that the show is based on a book, so technically who Belly ends up with is never really a mystery, but knowing the ending doesn't mean you can't still build tension. Take One Tree Hill, for example. I was a Brooke and Lucas fan, and in season 6, Lucas was deciding between Brooke, Peyton, and Lindsay. And at this point in the show, it was so very obvious that Brooke and Lucas were no longer even an option. Why did the writer decide to dangle Lucas in our face if that was the case? Because they were baiting us. It was so very obvious that this was a bait, and yet here I was still in La La Land being delusional, thinking maybe Brooke is gonna walk through that door. Maybe they still have a chance.
I believe. I'm not giving up. I'm frustrated right now. I'm emotional right now. I'm depressed right now, but I'm not giving up.
They didn't. But despite how obvious it was, because of the history and the depth of their relationship, it made me respect Brooke as an option anyway. And I still had a very fun time on a sinking ship of Brookies.
But one of these nights you're gonna realize it. I'm the guy for you, Brooke Davis.
In Smallville, everyone, and I mean everyone, knew Clark and Lois were going to be Endgame. I mean, it's literally Superman and Lois Lane. This is probably the most obvious Endgame in the history of Endgame. But that didn't mean Clark and Lana didn't matter. They were high school sweethearts. They were messy, exhausting, sometimes frustrating, but they were real. They had depth and years of development. Even though the writers always knew they were never going to make them Endgame, they were still giving their just due. The writers made sure you felt that heartbreak when it ended. Lana wasn't treated like a hurdle to get to Lois. She was a whole storyline, a formative one. That's why when Lois finally does show up in season 4, it feels like a shift, not a replacement. Even if you know a ship isn't Endgame, you should provide enough reasonable doubt for people to be able to delude themselves into thinking that it is. Like, I want to be delusional. Let me have that. No matter how delusional I want to be though, even I can't delude myself into the possibility that Belly actually ends up with Jeremiah. Not because I don't like Jeremiah, but because there's nothing in the show that points to her not ending up with Conrad. When I was first binge watching The Vampire Diaries, because I already knew that Elena ends up with Damon at the end, I kept thinking to myself like, damn, how in the hell does she end up with Damon? Because she seems so in love with Stefan right now. In The Vampire Diaries, both Stefan and Damon got seasons where Elena was fully committed to them. Both relationships were given space to fully breathe. In The Summer I Turned Pretty, in season 1, Betty likes Conrad, but then she kisses Jeremiah, but ends the season with Conrad. In season 2, she starts the season with Conrad. They date, break up, and then she ends the season with Jeremiah. In season 3, she starts the season with Jeremiah, and if they go by the book, she ends up with Conrad.
My sister done burnt too many bridges, and there's nothing I can do for her now.
That would be 5 times that Belly has flip-flopped in 3 seasons, and at no point does Conrad not feel like the inevitable choice. In season 2, we're supposed to be convinced that by the end of episode 8, it makes sense for Belly to choose Jeremiah over Conrad, when we spent half the season looking at flashbacks of Belly and Conrad falling in love, and the other half of the season watching Belly try and convince Jeremiah that she's not in love with Conrad. And you want me to believe this makes sense?
So you want to be with Jeremiah now?
Imagine how tired we are.
If she ends the season with Jeremiah, why did we spend so much time on her and Conrad instead of trying to convince us that that's actually believable? When Lucas was chasing Brooke in season 3 of One Tree Hill, we barely even saw him in scenes with Peyton. 80% of his screen time was spent with Brooke. When Lucas finally picked Peyton in season 4, you felt and believed that it was a genuine battle. In the early seasons of The Vampire Diaries, there were certain points where it felt like Elena would rather spit on Damon than date him. Just because the writers know who their endgame ship is does not mean they should neglect the other side. They still need to be fleshed out. But as much as Belly's love for Conrad is such a constant looming presence in the show, it never really feels like Belly ending up with Jeremiah is ever really a possibility. And I honestly don't think Jeremiah is ever really given a fair enough chance. There's never a point where I was thinking, oh, where is this gonna go? We know exactly where it's going. They've made it painfully obvious. Even their mother is rooting for Conrad, and then she died, which makes it even worse because now it seems like it's her dying wish. I mean, she even told Belly on her deathbed to look after Conrad. Tough luck, Jeremiah. It's what your mother wanted. What can you do? Imagine the realization that in her dying days, your mother's happiness came from the fact that your brother is dating the love of your life.
She chose him, they chose each other, and
Our best friend.
It's not just their family. Belly's family's Team Conrad too. Her brother is actively rooting against Jeremiah. You have her mother writing poetry about Conrad being the center of Belly's universe. How is Jeremiah supposed to compete with this? He doesn't feel like a contender. He feels like an obstacle. He's just Belly's pit stop on the road to destiny. It almost feels like the writers are scared of Belly and Conrad having any real competition. And yes, we know somebody has to lose. Conrad is who Belly ends up with according to the books. But this show isn't marketed as the Belly and Conrad love story. It's marketed as a love triangle. And just because we know the winner, that doesn't mean you just phone it in. You can still write it like it's a battle. Make me question what I already know. Make people sweat a little bit. That's the fun of it. Giving Jeremiah a fair shot won't undermine the Conrad ending. It will make it even better. The losing ship does not have to be treated like losers for the entirety of the show. If you're gonna sell a love triangle, you should make the losing ship feel like it could have been the ending, even if deep down, we know it's not. That's what makes it tragic. That's what makes it interesting. When it's just, we need a love triangle because teen drama demands it, then you get this.
Hell, no, you know what? Actually, it's cool. It's cool, I get it. I was just a distraction to keep you busy while you waited for Conrad.
But despite all of that, this show still could have had one saving grace. There are a lot of things you can get away with in a teen drama. Weak writing, flat side plots, but there is one thing a show like this cannot afford to miss. Because no matter what, you can't fake chemistry.
Well, I still think you should quit.
What'll you give me if I do?
But when you have your chemistry reads on Zoom, nothing can save you now. Love triangles thrive on the irrational behavior of being in love. That is the anchor. For any of this to work, we have to be convinced that these characters are so in love that they would do absolutely idiotic things to be together. There is nothing logical about going back and forth between two brothers. It's completely ridiculous, which is part of the reason why people complain about Billy as a character so much. But it's not like we haven't seen this before. As much as people complain about Belly, Elena from the Vampire Diaries was even crazier. Not only was she dating brothers, she was dating dead brothers.
She was literally dating dead people.
They were both terrible choices, but one of the reasons why so many people were able to suspend disbelief is because Elena's chemistry with both brothers was so strong. And I can be objective. I mean, I hated Damon, and still do. But Elena and Damon had moments. They had iconic moments. I didn't want it to be iconic, but it was. I mean, I can't make the music not bop. That's why Stelena versus Delena worked. You could feel the angst. You understood why Elena couldn't let go of either brother because they both felt like real connections. When Elena and Damon finally got together, I understood why, because their chemistry was just that undeniable. As messy as it was, it made sense why the writers went in that direction. Now, I don't think they should have been endgame, but that's a conversation for another video. Chemistry has the power to make stupid decisions feel like destiny. Belly makes a lot of irrational decisions in the name of love, and that would be fine if I actually believed she was in love.
In the stillness of the night, our hearts begin to take flight, like two.
It ain't gon' it ain't gonna work.
And chemistry isn't necessarily terrible, but it's not all that good either. I might be more forgiving if this were the B plot, but this is the A plot. The love triangle is the show. If you're gonna make your love triangle your entire show, I need to be feeling fireworks throughout every episode, and not just the one Jeremiah lets off from the patio. For the majority of season 1, we get corny dialogue over explaining how in love they are, as opposed to them actually making me feel it. I never get that moment, the one where they look at each other and you can see it in their eyes and everything just clicks, where it's like, oh, that's why this is messy. That's why all of this back and forth is worth it. That moment never comes. I'm never convinced that any of this makes sense. And it's off-putting. It's off-putting when you're constantly telling me that these characters are madly in love and the chemistry does not meet that expectation. It makes so much of the dialogue feel unearned. It makes it feel like you're trying to gaslight me. Like, I watch this show and I hear some of the things that are being said and I feel like I'm being gaslighted. Like, what do you mean you're out of your mind in love? Why? For either couple, forget the shift wars. Can you seriously say there's a scene where you feel fireworks? Not sparks, because there are some sparks, but fireworks? Are we watching the same show? I don't think I'm asking for too much, because back when chemistry reads used to matter, people would get casted solely because of them. Executives would show up for these chemistry reads. It was important. Paul Wesley auditioned 9 times to the Vampire Diaries, and the CW didn't even want him until they saw his chemistry with Nina Dobrev and casted him because of that. And I'll give them credit. I know they were dealing with COVID and things did get better in season 2, but by that point we're already a full season into the show until I actually felt something. And don't give me the excuse that because it's a teen drama we shouldn't expect too much. If Zac Efron and Vanessa Hudgens can have chemistry on Disney Channel, they can have chemistry here. Being a teen drama is not an excuse. When the chemistry doesn't live up to expectations, it doesn't feel like they're crazy in love. It just feels like they're crazy. And that's not very fun to watch. You can write all the pretty lines, all the emotional monologues you want, but when the chemistry isn't there, it's just noise. You tell us that it's this and that is that, and I'm just not feeling it. Too much exposition, not enough chemistry. It's like this show is more focused on telling us it's a love triangle than actually giving us one. But at this point, I'm in too deep. So yes, I will be seated for season 3, and I'll probably make another video complaining about that one too. So if you want to see that, stick around, subscribe, and let me know down below.